Well, today we're talking about environmental sustainability here at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, and it's a subject that affects us all, whether we're patients, visitors, or members of staff. And I'm really fortunate to be joined by two members of the Trust Sustainability team, and they're both called Rachel, which is fantastic for me because I'm terrible with names. But let's talk about sustainability. So, and I'll let you kind of whichever Rachel go first. But tell us a bit the sustainability team. What is it, and why do we have it at STH?
Gosh, so sustainability is something which the NHS recognised back in 2020. Where it was recognised that the health crisis is a climate crisis, and the impacts of climate change are very much being seen in patients who are coming into hospitals, in our general day-to-day lives as well, and how we can resource supporting our services, our patients and the general public in trying to respond to that as well.
And tell us who we've got in the sustainability team doing that work.
So I'm head of sustainability. We have Rachel Cottam, who's here with us now, who's a strategy and planning manager, and we also have Laura Fish, who's a sustainable travel manager.
And you mentioned in the introduction there the kind of climate crisis. What exactly do we mean by that?
I'll let Rachel answer that. Rachel's leading on some of the adaptation to climate change work in the Trust, so she's much better placed than I am to answer that.
Yes, what we mean by the climate crisis is the impact that adverse weather may have on our ability to deliver services and deliver care to our patients. But it also affects our buildings, so how are our buildings resilient to that changes in temperature. We know that it's going to get hotter. We also know it's going to get wetter. So we're currently completing a huge risk assessment in terms of what are the impacts of those on everything from our buildings to our supplies to our IT systems to how we can continue to deliver that care to our patients.
And this week is a really good week to talk about this. We've had some of the kind of record highest temperatures in June this last week, and I'm sure that will have what kind of things, where will that have impacted on the Trust? You've given a flavour of that there, Rachel, but give us a feel for kind of what are the climate impacts, the environmental impacts that we see across an organisation like Sheffield Teaching Hospitals.
I think it's the impact of the heat, isn't it? And our ability to keep that thermal comfort, so keep that temperature where our patients are comfortable. Because if their patients are experiencing the impacts of that heat, that's heat exhaustion, that's dehydration. It obviously affects their recovery, but also affects their experience whilst they're in our care. But equally important to that is the impact that it has on our staff and their ability to, continue on delivering that care in those conditions. It's really, really difficult.
Sorry, Rachel.
I was just going to say, also factoring into the whole climate crisis as a health crisis, is that there are so many health conditions which are exacerbated in the heat as well. So people then are presenting with several health conditions rather than perhaps just one, which they would have done when it wasn't a heat wave. We know that mental health in particular is exacerbated. There are some medications which react differently in the body in hotter temperatures as well. So it's really pulling all of that information together and understanding how as a trust we resource that impact as well. So, there are lots of people who are here with several different conditions, and when we're segregating people into designated ward areas for certain conditions, how do we make sure that the other things as well are also then accounted for within that, as well as trying to make everybody comfortable in that heated area.
And it's hard to think it now, but it won't be long until we're probably sat here and it's throwing it down with rain, or it's icy and snowy. So the flip side of that, we've talked about the heat. What's the environmental impact of some of those other weather conditions? And I presume it's about extremes that's the real challenge.
Yeah, extremes is that extreme weather in terms of snow and ice and freezing temperatures that impacts on patients' ability to travel, staff ability to travel to get in, supplies getting into our hospital, those types of things. And also, the requirement to heat our buildings. We've got a very old estate. So, to keep those at a temperature where it's suitable to maintain that care for patients.
So let's come on and talk. We'll talk after a couple of songs about what we can do and what you're doing across the organisation to help impact on the environment and sustainability. But just before we do that, really interested for our listeners, your backgrounds, what interested you to get into sustainability and how did you get here? I'm trying hard not to do the job interview question, but kind of give us the 40-second picture for both of you of how you got into this role and why.
So for me, I've got a degree in chemistry. I came out of university and went into the construction industry, in the labs in the construction industry, testing building plaster and various different materials. And then I'd worked in the labs for probably 10 or so years and decided that wasn't for me anymore. I didn't want to stand in front of machines and equipment day in, day out and measuring out volumetric flasks of things, and looked for other opportunities within the organisation that I was in. And a role came up that was a life cycle assessment analyst, which is all about understanding what those environmental impacts are for the products that we were making within the business. So I'd been in the labs, I'd seen, how we made the products, what additional materials went into them. So I could understand it from a chemical composition point of view, but then also trying to understand what are the environmental impacts associated with that. So we did a lot of heating, wetting and heating again of that material. Did we then see that environmental impact that was associated with each of those steps as well? So and then once I moved into the environmental team, it kind of went from there. I went and did being environmental and sustainability lead in the organisation, and throughout that doing my chartered chemist role as well. So I did a lot of community work through that accreditation, and then have kind of continued in trying to link in with local schools when I was in the construction industry to encourage them to come and work for us, because as an industry we were very much sited, several sites across the UK, but we're very much in little villages around the UK, and it was very much a family tradition of being in that industry, and we're very used to seeing people coming in when they're 16, leaving school and staying right up until they turn 65 when they retired. So trying to make sure we've got that throughput of people as a people sustainability perspective. And then I was made redundant from there. Then I went to the University of Birmingham to be sustainability manager there, and then came to Sheffield. Wow. So yeah, done a variety of sustainability things. So,
Rachel?
Yeah, so I was a radiographer for 28 years. So worked my way up from a newly qualified radiographer right through to being a section head in radiology. And then I suppose I got to age 50 and realised that I needed to do something else maybe, and an opportunity came up for me to do the senior leaders apprenticeship, which it was a case of now or never. But as part of that, I did a lot of modules on business improvement and strategy and innovation, and did really well with those. And then so thought, actually, can I use my skills in another area within the trust? And then a secondment opportunity came up within strategy and planning, and I've never really looked.
Rest is history.
Rest is history. Never looked back to it really. But I also trained to be a microsystems coach way back in the day. And sustainability or sustainable healthcare to me is all around that service improvement. So looking at what we do, making sure that what we are doing is adding value, making sure we're minimising that waste, and making sure that we're delivering the best service and good healthcare, because good healthcare is sustainable healthcare.
And from a team perspective, it definitely helps that Rachel's had that experience in the clinical world as well, because obviously I'm very operational and not NHS previous to my role here. So that's definitely benefited a lot of the work that we've been doing.
Well, we'll come back to that patient focus. I'm really keen to learn a bit more about that. But this first song we're going to play, which is fitting for this last week, is Here Comes the Sun. Anything you want to say to introduce this song?
Well, I think looking out the window, that is all that we can see right now. So, why not?
Brilliant. Thank you. Speak to you shortly. Welcome back. I've got Rachel and Rachel with me today, who are part of the STH sustainability team. So We were talking a lot about the why sustainability is important for the NHS, for the climate, for our patients. But should we talk a bit now about the how? So, or the what? What are the things that teams are doing and can be doing across the organisation to really help our sustainability agenda? Rachel?
So,
I
Rachel
said that,
Morris,
not looking
yeah.
at you there. Did you notice?
Which one? So we launched our most recent sustainability plan probably this time last year, which is a 3-year plan of action for the trust to align with some of the recommendations that have come out of NHS England. So we had a previous plan that ran from 2022 to 2025, which was very much about us understanding what we were doing, what was our current situation, to have a baseline to measure from and to go from. And last year, we've reviewed how that worked. So there were 10 themes within that plan, which is an awful lot for a team of 2.5 people to be trying to run. And also thinking about where we could actually have some real impact and see some of that decarbonisation happening. So we've chosen 5 areas. Those areas are adaptation to climate change. We've also got energy that sits within that. We have travel and transport. We have supply chain and procurement. And then we also have workforce and system leadership as generic topic areas, and each area is then led by different teams across the trust as well. So it's not all the responsibility of the sustainability team. It is generally something which should be seen across the trust through different areas. So we've targeted some really tricky goals in some of those areas as well, some really ambitious goals that we want to achieve by 2028, with full recognition that as STH sustainability team, that's not something we can necessarily do on our own, so very much leaning into some of the partnerships which were already there with STH, but also looking at how we can work particularly with academia in the region as well, and looking at where we can extend some of our learnings across other NHS trusts as well. So very much a team effort of trying to get to
and
that
give
point.
us a flavour for some of those partnerships and that learning that we've got across the different areas.
So we've done a lot of work recently with the University of Sheffield, who've been really supportive in helping us understand some of that baseline stuff. So as I've described already, my background is absolutely not in NHS or healthcare in any way, shape or form. So trying to understand operationally how some of this is viewed, particularly from a clinical perspective in their day-to-day roles, is something that's really important in that, particularly the workforce and system leadership piece. Also trying to understand how we go about some of these things. So we've got quite a big target around energy, so we want to decarbonise our Northern General campus, at least have a plan for it by 2028.
And is that solar power and those kind of things?
It is those kind of things. So a lot of our energy consumption at STH is through gas and electric. We spend millions of pounds every year on our energy sources. So looking at how we can decarbonise, which invariably will mean using electricity, because more of the electricity on the grid is green power, so from wind, from solar, that kind of thing. Or perhaps even looking at air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps as well, which would then be that source of fuel, as it were, for a lot of the site. But again, we're not the experts in that, so who is the experts? How do we make sure we're doing something that we make a change, in the next 5 years perhaps, but then that isn't immediately outdated? Technology is moving on so much at the moment. We don't want to implement something as an NHS. We are slow at doing things, so how do we make sure that, we're very aware that it's public money, we need to spend that wisely, we need to make sure we're doing the right thing. So we're trying to reach out, particularly through the university networks, of understanding where is that research heading. If we do implement something, how do we make sure it's not immediately outdated and is fulfilling the objective that we're aiming for.
And Rachel, can I come to you? We talked a lot there about some of the big projects, but then you touched on the sustainability leads across the organisation there. So what are some of those individual projects that are maybe happening out in different teams that you'd like to talk about for others to hear about?
Yeah, I think within the workforce and leadership space, or that theme within our sustainability plan, we have a Sustain Hub network, which is not just for our sustainability leads, but for anyone that actually has an interest in sustainability, where we can share good practice, we can share ideas, we can do some education as well. We have started to do a monthly newsletter, which has been received quite well. We're getting some really good feedback of that. Each directorate does have a sustainability lead, and I think it varies across the organisation in terms of the time commitment that they can give to that, on top of, because it does feel like, and I think it's a cultural thing, it feels like sustainability is a bit of an add-on or something extra for people to do, when actually it is just looking at things through a different lens, because we are already doing good healthcare, we're already doing sustainable healthcare, so a lot of the things that people are doing is sustainability.
And what's some of the projects that those sustainability leads have done that have either had a significant impact that we can measure, or I understand sometimes that's also linked to reduced cost or reduced carbon or reduced travel, all those kind of different things. So give us a flavour of 2 or 3 of the things that you're particularly proud of.
Yeah, I think the CCA group.
So that's combined community and acute.
It is, sorry. They're really on it with sustainability. They have it integrated throughout their care group and throughout the directorates. They did a project on walking aids. I think they initially got Dragon's Den funding for that, but we are now recycling our walking aids. Maybe people have seen the blue bins around our sites, and so we're still trying to, I think, verify some of the data around that, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to share how successful that's been.
And it does look at, when you go past those bins, there's one by Chesterman and Clock Tower at the northern. I presume there's one on the Hallamshire side,
by the outpatients. Yeah.
They're often full and then empty and then full again. So that's any member of the public, any patient can bring back their crutches,
walking sticks,
in a frame, frame. So, and just leave them there. That's all they need to do.
Yeah, we encourage that, and I think that the patients, when they are issued with them, they are then, encouraged to bring them back to us, which is great.
And they're also keen to bring them back as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
because
why would you want
previously, we've got stories of people having 5 walking frames in the garden because, they can't fit them in the house anymore. So, it absolutely has been a really positive thing that the project's come out with.
I think a project that's underway at the moment is the reusable tourniquets. So we're switching from single-use.
So this is a tourniquet that we use when we take blood, would that be right?
It is. Blood tests, putting in cannulas, things like that. The ones that we had were, I suppose, little bits of plastic, quite difficult for staff to use and not very nice for patients. And so as part of the Green Team competition in 2023, these were piloted in cardiology outpatients, and very successful, very good patient and staff feedback. And so we took the decision to roll that out across the organisation. So we're just starting to see the fruits of our labour, I suppose, with that.
That's amazing.
And then the other one is the reusable gowns. So these are surgical gowns used for in operating theatres and for minor procedures as well. We're switching from those single-use to reusable, so they will be sent off-site to be laundered and then obviously returned to us. So that is in its infancy, I suppose.
Yeah, we're almost halfway through now. We've just finished A and B theatres at the Hallamshire, so looking to do Q floor, and then we'll move over to Northern in a couple of
And feedback from the surgeons is positive?
Really positive, yep, had really positive feedback. The looking at the data ahead of launching it as well, we've seen that actually we have better resistance to liquids. They're just as comfortable as the single-use ones are. We're producing less waste, which then costs us less money as an organisation as well to dispose of that. So yeah, positive all round.
And so just before we go to our next song then, the kind of what would the key message be to staff if they're thinking of ideas or looking around? Is it kind of single use to multiple use, things that cut down on travel, on waste?
All of the above,
right.
Michael.
Am
Yeah,
I on
all of
message?
the above.
Well,
Completely on point. We just need you to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about it. Well, that's probably gonna. Should we go to our next song then, which is "The Green Green Grass of Home," which seems appropriate in terms of the green agenda.
Absolutely, yeah, and something we're seeing flourishing at the moment. We've done participated in No Mow May and extended it into June as well. So hopefully you should still be seeing lush areas, bar the heat waves conditions. But yeah, certainly that then means that all of our grounds are more resilient to the heat wave as well if we've got some lush grass to start with. So yeah,
fantastic. And after this song, tell me, because you were saying we might have a rare plant as a result of that, so let's talk about that after this song. Thank you. Welcome back. It's me, Michael. It's my Saturday soundtrack. Thank you for listening in, and I'm really pleased to have two Rachels with me today from our sustainability team. And before that song, we were just talking about No Mow May and the impact that that's having on wildlife. So, Rachel, tell us a bit about that and some of the discoveries we've had around STH on the back of it.
Yeah, we had a surprise email from a colleague a couple of weeks ago about discovering some bee orchids on near to the Herries Road on our Northern General site. So it's a reasonably rare flower, really beautiful, really partly dark purple, partly light purple, and is so called because it looks like a bee. So yeah, the fact that we've I don't know how many years we've been doing No Mow May, maybe it's about 3 years now. In those 3 years, making the habitat sustainable for something like that to grow is really really positive. So yeah, hoping that we get more things that we see like that, and who knows what wildlife in terms of insects and creatures we're getting around there as well. So yeah, really positive.
And I presume because we're fortunate with our sites and our community sites as well in terms of a fair bit of green land, and yeah, that's, I presume, great for patients and visitors as much as it is for the wildlife.
Absolutely. It's there's lots of research that's been done around how beneficial to well-being seeing greenery around you is. So yeah, really, really positive, really thrilled that we've been able to capture some of that as well. And yeah, we know we've got lots of wildlife areas as well on site. We've got the Secret Garden at Northern General as well, which is really beautiful. Currently, we've got lots of wildflowers in there as well. So it's really nice to see staff and patients using those areas as well.
And I was walking along B Road at the Hallamshire yesterday, and that's really beautiful now. The pots along there.
Yeah, those containers look good, don't they?
It feels a bit like the grey to green down in the centre of town. So fantastic. And so linked to that then, so one of the things that we've had recently is the Festival of Sustainability. So do you want to tell us a bit about what that was and why we had it?
So the Festival of Sustainability is something that we've held across NHS Sheffield organisations for the last 3 years. The last couple of years we did it for the whole of a month, and this year we just did a week-long festival. So we try and engage with some of the project teams, so like Rachel was talking about earlier, some of those teams that have led projects within the trusts, to talk about that project, to talk about how easy or how difficult that was to implement, any of the barriers or challenges that they might have come across whilst running that. And we also have been trying to look at more recently some of those areas where you can utilise some of that knowledge in your own homes as well. So, you know, particularly like in heatwave weather, which we didn't actually think about a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, perhaps we should have done something on pull the blind down and don't open the windows in the heat of the day. But yeah, lesson learnt for next year. That's something we can do for next year, isn't it?
And Rachel, did the Festival of Sustainability, did that generate more ideas? Was it about bringing ideas in, or was it more about pushing ideas out across the organisation?
I think it was a little bit of both, really. So we had a really good session with our 3 apprentices that are doing the corporate social responsibility apprenticeship with LDN, but it's very much focused on the NHS, so it's very tailored. And useful for the organisation, but also for the individuals as for their personal development. So we heard from those apprentices about their experience and advice for others who were thinking of doing that. We had sessions from health and social care. We had things around green menus. We also had things around cleaning products. Those types of things. So it generated a lot of interest, but it also, I think, we did a survey just asking, I think, 4 basic questions about what sustainability means to you, and I think we got some great feedback and some real food for thought.
And so on that food for thought, you mentioned green menus. I'm intrigued. What's a green menu?
So that's a plant-based menu, whereby I think it was the Mental Health Trust, one of their sites, were going over to a plant-based menu. And so the choices that the patients had when they were choosing the plant-based were the first choices within that menu, trying to encourage, not to say that, if they wanted to have a meat meal, they could, but they were trying to do that encouragement. But what they were able to do, and I think it's unfortunate we can't do it at STH, but what they were able to do in that setting was to get the patients involved in actually preparing those meals and learning about the recipe. And I think what that did for the staff as well was the staff I want to take that that recipe home, I want to make this at home. And so it's not only just encouraging what we do within our NHS settings, but it's actually changing, I suppose, hearts and minds at home as well.
I really like that crossover in everything that you're doing around. There's the sustainability piece, but it's beneficial for patients in new skills or taking things home. And so something for our staff then, and you've mentioned it, both of you there, a couple of times about the work-home crossover. So if staff were to think about how they could help bring sustainability to work, what would be the things that they might be doing at home that they could start to bring to work, or vice versa? Because I imagine what you can do in one environment, you can do in the other.
I think we don't, as an organisation, we don't necessarily make it an easy choice for staff to be sustainable. So, if you think about our waste and our waste streams, I suppose at home you'd be thinking about, if you've got some waste, which bin is it going to go in, and making sure that you are recycling it as much as you possibly can. Whereas I think with a very busy hospital environments, it's often so easy to just put whatever waste you've got in the nearest bin. And so then we find that we've got things within sharp bins that shouldn't be in there, things that are put into clinical waste that actually could go into domestic and recycling. And you would think about it more so at home.
Yeah, we all split our brown, blue, black bins, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of, actions that we can take, because it's not just a moan about people not segregating their waste, actions that we can take, can you put the recycling bin somewhere that you have to trip over it to then
obvious.
Get to another bin.
Yeah.
So, and I think also we're doing gloves off as well, so we're trying to promote the reduction in wearing of gloves, and because we just use an astronomical amount of them, and there's
that feels, sorry to cut across, that feels like quite a cultural change. So just for people listening, so this is about clinical staff, about being clear, when is it safe not to use gloves? Because often it just would be a natural reaction. I'm interacting with a patient, I'm putting gloves on. So clear guidance, is that right? Is that what the Gloves Off campaign is?
There is, and there is clear guidance out there, but I don't think it's landed fully within the organisation. So we are doing a sort of big campaign about that. But again, one of the things within the working environment, can you move those gloves a bit further away, so that and so it's those types of things.
Breaking the habit.
Yeah,
it is.
And it's encouraging that challenge as well. Be open to being challenged about why you're wearing gloves. Is there a clinical need for you to do that? And you said the clinical staff, it's not just clinical staff who are utilising those gloves. So you don't need to wear a pair of gloves to hold a door open, for example.
Right.
But you do see people do that because, like you say, it's almost an automatic reaction.
Yeah.
But also, what I'm also interested in looking at is, has our usage of aprons decreased as well with the decrease in gloves? Has that decreased? Because you automatically seem to go gloves, apron, So if people are not doing the glove bit, do they still need the apron? Are they still going for that? So.
And I think we're really interested, aren't we, to hear if there's hear from staff. If there are things that say do at home but are able to be translated into the working environment. Is there anything that we can champion as sustainability leads, and that we can educate and put that message out there? And so we'd be very interested to hear from people.
Great. Well, we'll have another song and then we'll come back after that and talk a bit more about exactly ideas and the ask of our staff. So this third song that you've picked is Michael Jackson, an Earth song, very environmentally focused. Anyone want to kind of introduce this or a few words on this Michael Jackson classic?
Yeah, I think we've chosen the Earth song because we need to protect it.
Lovely. Thank you. Welcome back. It's me, Michael. It's my Saturday soundtrack, and I've had with me this morning, I can't believe we're getting to the end of the show, Rachel and Rachel from our sustainability team. And we've been talking all things sustainability, why that's important for the NHS, why it's important for patients, why it's important for the climate crisis. But clearly some of this is about the here and now. Some of this is about the future. Where do you think we'll be in 5 years' time? Where do you want us to be in 5 years' time on this agenda?
That's a great question. So in 5 years' time, according to our sustainability plans, we would like to understand how we move to a decarbonised state. So talking earlier about the fuel that we use to power our estate, we would like to have a ventilation plan in place, because we know that some of the ventilation is getting older and is really struggling on our sites. So ensuring that we've got that much more modernised. We also want to see our staff particularly using more sustainable forms of travel, so walking, wheeling, cycling, using buses, using trams. Trying to really impact on those conversations that we're having with both the mayoral combined authority and the council currently. And then also that will impact patients as well, either by perhaps freeing up some parking spaces or by also them using some of those public services as well.
Because I imagine travel must be a big carbon contributor, is it? And particularly kind of outpatients, is it?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it's perhaps not as big as you might think it is. Because what we're buying is a huge impact in terms of carbon. So medicines have a huge carbon impact associated with them. But it's a big enough impact that's almost equivalent to our energy usage as a trust.
So going back to what we talked about earlier, so care closer to home then. Yeah. So if we kind of do that agenda, that would help the sustainability
Absolutely,
agenda.
Yeah. And trying to understand what that care is, what that should look like, where are those areas where perhaps there's, more respiratory issues, or is there more diabetes in certain areas of the city, and how do we, as a health system, move that care nearer to them? So it's not just about STH services, it's about the NHS as a whole and moving those services to be more accessible for everybody. Yeah, that's really important.
Rachel, your view in 5 years' time, where would you like to be, or where do you think we will be?
Yeah, I think the active travel, it's got the health benefits, hasn't it, associated with it, for both our patients and staff. But in terms of procurement, we're buying a lot of single-use items, and so in 5 years' time, it would be great if we could look at and roll out across the organisation a switch from single-use to reusable. There is a list of high priority items from the Department of Health and Social Care, so a Design for Life it's called, which I think is one thing that we're working with procurement on, in terms of, is there anything on this list that we can look at? I think, but we don't want to bite off more than we can chew, really, because it's very easy to say there's all these items that we can switch, but we're such a huge organisation, and you need to think about maybe the collateral damage, because it may not be suitable for all, and so you need to assess those types of things. So we may be making things more difficult for people by switching to a reusable item, or they might welcome it. A lot of the staff that we talk to, they really they want to do this are asking us questions about why are we doing this, why are we throwing this, why am I opening this tray and 3 of the instruments on it I'm not using. And so it's all that type of work, but it's a case of doing it piece by piece rather than just trying to do everything, because if we try to do everything we won't be successful. Whereas
And if staff have ideas about or want to start, it sounds like that dialogue, which sounds really good, about I've got this idea or I want to trade off between this idea and kind of the impact on staff. Where do they go to have that conversation?
So I think that they can, we have an email address, which is sustainability queries. We also have the Sustain Hub, where they can bring their ideas through that and discuss them. And I think their peers that join those calls, they would be really willing to help out in terms of giving advice if they've tried something in their area already, and try to avoid some of those pitfalls that they may have come across. And so making a subsequent rollout or implementation more successful and quicker.
And how do they find out about that? Sounds brilliant, the Sustain Hub.
If you go onto our sustainability SharePoint page, all the information is on there. So yeah, and also approaching your sustainability lead, who should be known to you in your directorate as well.
And is there a list of those, if not on the SharePoint
There is
site?
on the SharePoint site, yeah.
And we do have a newsletter now, and so we do that, populate that with it's got a theme. I think this month is Clean Air, because it was Clean Air Day on the 18th of June. And so we've got some information in there, and then a link to further information if people want to read it. We feedback on the progress of the project, so that's on gloves, that's on gowns, that's on tourniquets. Within there, there's a bit right at the top of reading 60 seconds of things you want to know this month about sustainability. And within there are links to the Sustain Hub. And like we say, we're very welcoming, we're very open. Anyone can join. You don't have to be a sustainability lead. And I think one of the things that I think we'd like to look at in the next few years is how we engage with our patients over sustainability, because those conversations are quite difficult, and so we need to look at different forums that we can do that, because talking about sustainable healthcare when a patient is sick in hospital may not be the best time to be doing that. In some ways it is, because if they see that waste and they see all that packaging that a member of staff is using and then throwing in the bin, they might have comments to make about that, but often they're not well, that's why they're here. So looking at alternative forums where we can engage with our patients around that as well.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for coming on my show today. You've been absolutely fantastic. The work that you're doing, I've really found really interesting and clearly having an impact on right back where we started, the climate crisis, spend, patient experience and staff experience. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you, and kind of really proud base, patient first, that kind of ownership and that absolute delivery. So thank you for that. So kind of final words over to you two. What's the kind of, Rachel, message out to staff in terms of if they could take one thing from the last kind of 90 minutes that we've had together, what would you want them to take?
Get involved. Come and talk to us. Lead on some of the projects in your areas. Come and ask questions. But yeah, come and be involved and help us lead the change. Because, like we've already said, doing that, you're often doing stuff at home, making those decisions at home that are more sustainable decisions, and how do we bring those into the workplace?
Fantastic. And Rachel, you touched on there kind of more conversations with patients. What, for our patients and members of the public listening, what's the one message that you'd want them to hear?
I think be curious, ask questions, and think about their care and where that's adding value or not.
So ask questions when they're in, having their outpatients, speak to our staff about it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, genuinely. I really, really appreciate it. And this final song we've talked about kind of 5 years from now. Do you want to tell us why you've picked this final song that we're going to play?
So we've chosen Wonderful World. And yeah, in 5 years' time, we hope the world is more wonderful.
Well, you're definitely making a difference to that. Thank you again for coming in. Thank you for all that you do across our acute and hospital services, and speak to you all soon. Thank you.